So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Jason is based out of Hobart, Tasmania. He is currently Insight4's quality assurance team leader, and he's there to ensure that Insight4 clients can expect a high level of quality, not just in their software, but also in their approach to communication, documentation, and consultation. And when he's not working, he does enjoy time with his family, playing video games and the guitar. And I asked him if he were to win $1 million, what would he do? And he said it would allow for the paranoid purchase of a house large enough to prepare for the possibility of a set of twin boys to go with his 6-month-old twin daughters. It sounds like you have a full house there already. So
very much so.
Yeah. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the controls over to Jason of Insight4.
Hello everyone, my name is Jason, as we said, and I'll get my presentation going here. Okay, so just a few more details about myself and Insight4. As we said, I'm the quality assurance team leader for our company. I've been managing teams of various sizes, peaking at about 14. I've had 4 years JIRA experience, including multiple JIRA managed multi-million-dollar projects, and I've had 26 years of experience as a pedant, which I think is helpful when you're doing this sort of workflow design. And some information on Insight4. You can find the majority of our information at insight4.com if you want to check it out. We're in our 8th year of operation. We're a Microsoft certified partner. We specialise in bespoke application development for private enterprise and government clients. And we recently won the 2010 EMP Innovation Award at the Telstra 2010 Tasmanian Business Awards. And we also won the Tas ICT. Now, the JIRA version that you'll see me using today is JIRA 4.0.1. So just to give you a heads up in case your version differs and you worry about what's going on there. And so without further ado, we will get started. Okay. So we get to look at some workflow design and implementation in JIRA. I'll start with this PowerPoint presentation. We'll go through the design process and 3 processes that I've come up with that we use here on a daily basis. And then after that, I'll actually show you how to implement the smaller one of them in JIRA. Okay. So just a few points to begin with. Workflows solidify process. We have fewer lost issues and better reporting. So they allow us to define, disseminate and enforce our processes, which we think is really important. They provide client confidence, and they do a really good job of building client confidence. If we provide our workflow diagrams in the project initiation phase, in our documentation, it shows the client that we care about process. And subsequently, if our processes are of a high quality, it stands to reason that the work that we deliver through them will be as well. I suggest that you workflow-inate common processes, especially undocumented ones. Processes that see daily use, even though people tend to be fairly familiar with them, they usually require someone to be, keeping on top of them and making sure that people are using them correctly. And it tends to be that undocumented processes will disappear as soon as lose track of them or leave the company or whatever the case may be. Keep your processes simple but comprehensive, as I say, simplicity over complexity. You need to ensure that processes are comprehensive but overly complex. If you can't be without every single node in a new process, which is massive, and that's something that you can work through. It entirely depends on the process, each process itself. And train your colleagues and clients. Creating an elegant process and implementing it in JIRA isn't quite enough to get the job done, in my opinion. As good as JIRA is at enforcing workflows, nothing beats personal training. Processes succeed when the people using them are aware of them and are aware for the reasons of their existence. Okay. So we'll start with internal defect lifecycle. This covers defects which are logged against projects by staff within your company. So we're not talking about clients, we're not talking about external contractors or anything, we're talking about people who work for your company. These could be testers, they could be developers, doesn't matter. Anyone can log a defect against a project if they find one. And so this is the process that one of those issues will take within JIRA. So we're going to focus on the outset. So for all three of these, we'll start with the basic flow of the process, and then we'll go back and look at alternate flows and escapes and other things like that. So here we can see that a defect has been found by an internal staff member. We can see here that they've logged the defect into JIRA. New internal defects are logged into the open state. In this state, defects are brand new and have yet to be worked on. Just a note, we can see that this can either be assigned to a defect pool or to specific users as necessitated by the size of your team or project. Specific users are nice, but it tends to be that there's usually someone who stands out who gets a lot of defects assigned to them. On a big project, it might be better to create there as a pool of for newly created defects, which other developers can pull things in and out as necessary. The next state there is the in progress state. Once the defect has been logged into the open state, a developer can stop work on it. While the defect is being worked on, it sits in the in progress state, and when it's not, it goes back to the open state. And this provides us the ability to report on how quickly the defects are picked up and worked on, and how long it takes for each to be completed, etc. That's why we have two separate states there, rather than just open to fixed. Moving on, they fix defects. It gets moved to the fixed state, and is ideally assigned back to the original reporter. This could, again, for a test team to work through at a future point, but these can be a bit dangerous because sometimes things can get forgotten about because they're not being bugged by emails. And finally, if the fix is confirmed to be present, the defect is no longer there, then we can confirm that and close it. The defect's done, so that's the basic flow there for a standard internally logged defect. Alright, some alternate flows. So we've just added the rejected and the two rejected escapes here to the more analysis required status. So we've provided the ability for developers to reject a defect in the case that more information is required on the grounds that a defect is perhaps as per design or not covered in the current scope of the project for whatever reason, or they might just need more information. Next we'll add the updated and no longer required escapes here. So the test team or the tester can deliver more information as necessary, and that will return the defect to the open state. Or if they agree in the analysis of the development team, then we can close it as it is no longer required. Next we have on hold. We've got it over there on the left of the diagram. This is an interesting one. The concept of on hold is there to deal with issues that, for whatever reason, aren't going to see a fix in the current release. If an issue is marked as on hold, it'll be taken from the open pool of defects, so it isn't there just blaring at people asking it to be fixed. It'll be taken out until the next release of the project is done. At this point, the defect should be worked on. If a single defect is placed on hold for 3 consecutive releases, it should be assigned to someone in a managerial position to make a decision on whether or not it should be fixed straight away or just closed. We don't want these defects hanging around forever. An exception to the rule, rather than, it's a pretty hard line to take, either fix it now or close it, if a defect has been stuck on hold for 3 consecutive releases. An alternative to that is we could have all of the ultra low priority issues just get thrown into a bucket, which can be picked through post-release, and you can confer with the client about how important they feel these defects are and whether they want them fixed straight away or later. And that means that any defect that's been placed on hold for 3 consecutive releases can be placed there with no consideration from management. They don't need to deal with it if you've got that catch-all bucket, which you can just add as a separate state and transition in JIRA. Then we've got the rejected state here, which has just come up from the fixed state. It means if the defect is still occurring or more work needs to be done to the issue, it can be returned to the open state. And we've got the reopened state there. So this gives us the ability to reopen an issue that has previously been closed. So we've logged a defect, it's been fixed, and we've confirmed that it was fixed and we've closed it. But then during future regression testing, or working on another part of the project could cause a defect to reoccur, we can then open that defect back up. So it goes into a separate reopen state, from which we can a developer can start work from there. So it can re-enter the workflow back into in progress, or it can be rejected back into the fixed state, and then we just go back through the normal channels from then on. Okay, that's the internal defect lifecycle done. Now we'll move on to the client defect lifecycle. Client defects differ somewhat. They're defects which are logged by client staff members. They have a different workflow associated with them to provide some distance between the development team and the people logging the defects. This provides our dev team with the ability to concentrate on the tasks that they've already got assigned to them without having to confirm defects on top of that and do all that communication that goes on there. We call that triage, kind of like you see in a hospital. Triage is generally handled by the QA team. Very large projects can sometimes employ a separate triage team if the volume of defects being logged necessitates it. But they're more often than not reported to the QA team anyway, so you'll see here that we've just got the 4 streams rather than having a separate stream for triage. Sorry, the 3 streams. So we've got dev, testing or QA, and the client. And in the beginning here we have a defect which has been found by our client. They log it into JIRA, and it goes into the triage state rather than the open state. At this point, this is when our test team will confirm a defect's validity before we pass it on to the development team. Again, this could be a specific user or a pool, depending on the size of your project. Going through the basic flow, we confirm that the defect is present. It goes into the open state, like we saw before. And what we're confirming there isn't just that a defect is present, but that it is also truly a defect. It is a defect against the design of the piece of the functional area that we're working on. So we'll go back to the documentation, the original designs, and we'll confirm that the software should be doing what the client is expecting it to be doing, and that they're not maybe perhaps asking us to do more than the current scope of the project. So here it's been passed to the development team, and it is awaiting a fix. Developer starts work on it, so it goes into the in-progress state. They fix it, goes into the fixed state, and awaits confirmation from our internal test team. If we verify that fix is present, we'll pass it on to the client, who will do another run of verification. Sounds like we're doubling up, but it's important for both teams to have the opportunity to confirm the existence of that fix, and plus it's going to mean that we're missing less. And if the client agree that the defect is in fact fixed, they will close it. So you can see here that if a client opens an issue, they should be the ones to close it. We feel that that's pretty important. We never want our clients to be opening an issue, having it disappear into JIRA, and then have it closed and then never hear about it ever again, because then JIRA can become a bit of a black hole for issues, and that just destroys client confidence. So it's very important that the client has the power to close defects that they have logged, and therefore they have final confirmation right as well. Okay, some alternate flows. Having logged a defect over here, the triage team have the opportunity to confirm the existence and validity of the defect in the triage state. If we can't reproduce the defect, if it doesn't fall into the scope of the project, of the design, or we just need more information before we can continue, we can reassign it back to the client in the waiting on client state. At this point, the client can provide us with more information. They can make comments or argue for the validity of the defect compared to the design, and then they can use the more information provided transition there. Or if they agree that it's no longer required, they can close the defect. Next, we add the on-hold bucket again. I just want to say that if you're going to use on-hold in a process that involves issues logged by the client, it is very important to explain what it means to them in clear terms. Because on the face of it, on-hold, if someone's just looking at this process diagram, on-hold can very much look like a bit of a too hard basket, and we don't want our clients to believe that we're just trying to skip work like that. So it's very important you explain that process to them very clearly. Next, we've added a couple more escapes. This provides the the development team with the ability to ask the QA team for more information, or to reject the defect from a technical perspective. So we've got this rejected escape here. You'll notice that they reject it back to the triage team, the QA team, rather than to the client. Again, that's to separate those two groups of people. We make sure our QA team are the point of contact for the client with regard to defects. Also, even though we have confirmed the existence of a defect, the development team has more technical knowledge than the QA team does generally, as a rule, so they need to have the ability to reject ones as well. We've also provided another escape here for the QA team to be able to reject a fix once it's been placed, just like we did in the internal defects process. And over here at fix confirmation for the client, if we have confirmed a fix but the client aren't happy with it, they can reject it again back to the triage state. And then we can go back to the communication point here if we need to, or we can pass it back on for more work. And finally, we've added the reopen state again. Exactly the same explanation as before. In this case, it enters the workflow again at the open state, so the triage team deal with it here. So it can re-enter it open, or it can re-enter back at the waiting on client points. Alrighty, and the final process we're going to look at today is the change request lifecycle. This process exists to provide an entry point for new work that your clients wish to add to a project that's extra to the current scope of the project. This is an example of a process for which it's imperative that a strong enforceable process is in place, because we're dealing with work that's out of scope. It will require new money, extra money, and we need to make sure that we work in a very transparent and predictable fashion. As I say, nothing shatters client confidence more than unpredictability in the face of additional cost. So we always make sure we provide these three workflows in our initial project documentation to our clients, and we sit down with them and go through them in a one-on-one fashion to make sure that they understand these processes and know that logging an issue into JIRA isn't just a very quick little communication. It's not like an email. There's a big process around these things, and we're very thorough with this stuff. So we'll get into it. This process starts, so there's no defect involved here. This process starts with a gap usually found in the current requirements for the project. So our client has found that there's a part of the project which we need to do some more work on, because they might not have, it's very easy for us to miss things and forget stuff. We're fallible humans. So this provides them with the ability to add more work to the project. They're usually found by the client. It is also possible that we could be the ones to initially discover the gap, but all that will happen in that case is that we'll alert the client of the gap, and if they wish to make a change, it's up to them to raise it, as they're the ones footing the bill. So that's why we've got this starting in the client's stream there. Okay, so they've decided the gap's significant enough that they think a change is warranted and they're willing to spend a bit more money on it. So they'll log an initial request for change into JIRA, and that goes into the design state. Again, we're not starting with the open state here. The design phase of the process is a couple of loops which consist of the development and QA teams providing their estimates and design contributions to the final quote. The CR can be passed around development, QA, and management as much as is necessary to come up with the final design. So, as I say, these are loops here. So we're not necessarily just asking for a quote and returning a quote. We could be asking the development team to provide us with some technical documentation on the change. We could be asking the testing team to quote us on how long they think it's going to take. We could be asking them to maybe analyse the current requirements of the change from a different perspective, or we can use these states for that. They're not just for financial quoting or time quoting. And I should also just note here that any business analysis work that's completed on the change is done so in the design state or under the management swim lane there. It would be a pretty simple matter to add a third loop if you wanted to break out business analysis into a separate school, but just for the simplicity of the diagram, we've just included it there in management. Okay, next we have the finalised quote and final quote parts here. So the finalised quote transition and the final quote state. Once the quote has been finalised, it can be marked as such. We have a separate state for it because it may be necessary to hold on to a quote that we have completed for some period of time before passing it on to the client, and we want to have a separate state there to deal with, time management and stuff like that. Moving on, again, basic flow. Once the final quote's ready, it can be passed to the client for assessment. So they have the opportunity to have a look at what we've done and agree or disagree. In this case, they will sign off on it. It goes into the open state. I should note here that the open state usually exists at the beginning of JIRA's default workflows. If you create a new workflow in JIRA, it will already have an open state in there. That's just part of it. And so JIRA is used to open being the very first state of an issue. So if you do decide to make use of this process in your own instances of JIRA, any current change requests that you have in the system that you transition across to this new workflow will probably automatically get dropped into the open state, which, as you can see here, is post sign-off. So if that is the case, you can create a temporary transition back to the design state. I'll show you how to do that a bit later on. I'll show you how to create transitions in JIRA towards the end of the presentation. Alright, so we have an open change request now. It's been signed off, so we're starting development work on it. So we have the ability to start and stop work here. Once the work has been completed, get passed to the test team, the QA team for confirmation. If we confirm it, we pass that directly back to the client to let them know that the work is done, and they have the opportunity to test that new work and agree that it meets to the designs and the quote that we came up with earlier. And if all going according to plan, they'll verify and close. Okay, so some alternate flows and escapes. If we need some input on the design phase of the process from the client, more information or clarification, we can use the waiting on client state again, back into the design state. You'll notice that the management is the point of contact here for our clients rather than the test team, because with money involved, it's always good to make sure the management are the ones doing the talking. And then we just added a bunch of escapes here. So we've given the client the ability to reject at the assess quote stage. So we've got here the revise escape. If they find a piece of functionality from the CR was missed in implementation or something along those lines, they can reject it at that point. Obviously, if the client don't feel that the design meets the requirements of the new work, they can reject it from the assess quote stage there, and from completed they can reject also back to the open state. Now I should note that there's a potential loop. I'll just mark it. There's a potential loop here from assess quote to design to final quote to assess quote to design to final quote. It is possible for CRs to get stuck in negotiation, and it sucks when that happens. How you handle that is up to you, and how you deal with client engagement. I can't really give you any advice there. I just wanted to highlight the fact that that is a possibility, and you can get around it in in process design, you can do things like maybe saying that the client have, including this whole process, the client have maybe 3 opportunities to come back with different things and changes and all that sort of stuff. It's a little bit arbitrary, and it seems like an unnecessary limitation. Hopefully we can negotiate and get past anything along those lines just through good negotiation and being reasonable with each other, which would be lovely, wouldn't it? Okay, and that is it. So now we'll have a look at the implementation of a workflow in JIRA. This will be pretty quick. I'll just create a state and a bunch of transitions out of it. I'll show you a completed workflow, and then I might just quickly create a defect and show you how that workflow looks once it's been implemented. So I'll just drop out of this presentation and bring up JIRA. Okay, so as I say, this is JIRA 4.0.1, and we're looking at a list of workflows. I'm going to add a new one. So what we do is a JIRA administrator will navigate to administration, and I'll go down to workflows, and we'll go to add a new workflow. So we'll give it a name. We'll call it the webinar workflow, defect workflow, and you can give it a description if you want to. I won't bother now. We'll click add, and you can see that's added up here. So now we go and edit the steps. You can see it's inactive because it's not currently assigned to any workflow schemes which aren't assigned to any projects. So we'll go to steps. Here are the steps of this workflow. So what we'll do is I'll start implementing the internal defect lifecycle, which you remember looks like this. And currently all that we've got is an open state with no transitions in or out of it. So we can believe that the defect's been logged, the issue has been created, we're now in the open state. And here's the open state, no transitions at all. So we'll add some. So we can see now in a diagram here that the transitions out of the open state are on hold, rejected, and start work. So we'll create those. We'll click add transition. We'll go on hold, place on hold. So that's the name of the transition. We'll give it a description. The destination step is open. Sorry, no it isn't. It's going to be on hold. Oh, I need to add some states, my bad. Alright, we'll do that first. So add our steps. So currently we have open, we need on hold, in progress, fixed, more analysis required. So we'll start with on hold. Now linked status. These are all the statuses that are currently in JIRA. You can add statuses by clicking here on view all statuses. We'll leave that page. There are all of the statuses that we're currently using in our version of JIRA. You can create new statuses quite easily with the add new status panel here. As many as you need to cover all of the states in your workflows. And you can double up and reuse them if you need to. So we already have an on hold state. So we'll just go ahead and use that. We'll go back to our workflow. We'll create on hold. And the linked status is going to be on hold. There it is. I like to keep the names the same, just removes ambiguity. We'll add in progress, which links to in progress. We will add more analysis required, which we call waiting on client internally. And fixed, which is called resolved by JIRA. I'm sure you've all seen that one. Okay, so as we say, open has 3 outbound transitions: start work, on hold, and rejected. So we'll add those. So we'll go to open, add transition. I'll start with on hold. Give it a description. The destination step, which has been populated from the steps within this workflow only, will be on hold. Transition view, you can choose the screen that will appear or none at all if you wish. I'm just going to use default screens. I'm not going to cover screen design in this webinar. And we'll hit add. So we can see now that we've created the on hold transition. So we've now got this link here to the on hold state. Now we'll add rejected, which was going from open to more analysis required. Destination step is more analysis required, and our transition will be default again. And finally, the last outbound transition is start work to in progress. Give it a description. Destination step is in progress, and we'll have the default screen. So there we can see now that all of the outbound transitions are there for open. Let's have a look at open. So we can see that an issue is created into the open state. We can go to on hold, rejected, and start work, as is true here. Defect is logged. We can go to on hold, start work, and you can do a bunch of stuff with automation here. You can select a transition. Change pre and post conditions, validators, and post functions. I'm not going to go into that now because it's fairly complicated, but that's where the real power of the JIRA Workflow editor is. I'll let you have a play with that. There's quite a bit of documentation on Atlassian.com which will cover that stuff. And from there, I won't take you through creating the whole workflow because it'll take time, so I'll just go now to the final complete workflow. You can have a look at it. Some stage. So we'll use the internal defects. So there you can see we've got open, in progress, on hold, fixed, closed, more analysis required, and reopened. And all of those transitions are there as well. And if we counted them, we would see that the same number is there. So what I'll do now is create a defect which uses this workflow, and you can see how that looks at the end of the day. And this is where the fun bit is. So test defect. I'll sign it to myself so it doesn't bug anyone. Oh no's. A defect. We do use better defect descriptions than that here at Insight4, but not really in this sort of presentation. And we'll create it. Okay, so you can see here we've got our new available workflow actions panel. So that gives us the ability to use those transitions that we created before, start work, rejected, and on hold. So let's go through the basic flow. I've created this, I've assigned it to a developer, say, and they're ready to start work, so they'll click start work. We've changed to in progress, just like we would have done here, gone from open to in progress. They can fix the defect, and once it's been fixed, it should go to a screen for that. Yay, fixed. Assign it back to the reporter, which was me again. We're now in the resolve state, and our available workflow actions are rejected and confirmed, just like they are here. So it's been fixed, and it's fixed in the resolve state. We can reject or we can confirm. We will confirm, which will close the issue. We'll comment on our change. Woo, it's fixed. And we're done. That is closed. Okay. I think that's everything. We've seen the creation of workflows and how they work in JIRA, and we know why they're great. There we go. I'll pass control back over to Morgan.
All right, let me just take this back and So if you guys have questions, please feel free to chat them in. Whoops. And I'll start asking those questions. A few questions did pop in. So one of them, what's the largest workflow you have created, and what was the use case?
The most complex workflow, I should say, that we use here is probably the change request workflow. We we want to keep our workflows fairly simple. We don't want to go overboard with them, so we'd rather have multiple workflows for different issue types, rather than having particularly big and complex ones. So as we saw before, the change request workflow is fairly complex because it includes both the design phase of a change request and the development phase of the change request. So we felt that it was, as I said in the presentation, we felt that it was really important that that process was clearly stepped out and is educated to our clients, because it is a fairly kind of yucky part of fixed price work. Because, as I say, it means money is involved, and that is the best place to be very rigorous with your workflows and processes.
Yeah. Okay, and one of the earlier questions I had, I think it was when you mentioned your JIRA version that you're on, which was 4.0.1.
Yep.
Someone asked is there any reason why you don't update to the latest version as soon as it's released?
It's probably got a lot to do with the fact that our admin guys here are very busy fellas, and also just the time it takes. There's no real reason for it. We do like to update when we can, and I believe it is probably on his to-do list at the moment.
Okay.
So no specific reason.
Yeah. And one person, they were impressed with what you used to generate the PNG of the workflow, specifically the internal defect lifecycle.png.
Yep, I did that with Microsoft Visio.
Visio, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and for people using Confluence. Yep.
Sorry, you're...
I was just saying, I was just going to give a plug for people using Confluence. You could use Glyphy, would work really well for that as well.
Yeah, there are a number of tools, and we do use Confluence here. I just Visio because it was what I had on my machine currently.
Yeah. All right.
There's also some fun plugins for JIRA which do that sort of thing as well, which you can look into in the Atlassian plugin exchange.
Okay. And then here's one, which I'll just ask it verbatim. How do the lanes get configured? For example, in Greenhopper, there are to do, in progress, and done. Are they configured here?
They're not explicitly configured in JIRA. Those were just swim lanes that I used for the process design, just to show in a clear way where the responsibility lies for each of those states. But no, they don't have explicit definitions in JIRA itself. You could do that with post functions and automatic assignment if you wanted to, but I haven't in this case. Okay. We tend to do that manually because the people working on projects can shift around sometimes, so we don't want to do all that automation and then have to undo it later.
Yeah. Okay, here's one that came in. Can you create a workflow that forces the developer to record time tracking information?
I believe so. I haven't here at this point. I think you can do time tracking within JIRA. Is that correct, Morgan? There's an application.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, there's a number of them out there. I'm trying to think of one. Yeah, I'm not sure actually.
There are. Yeah. There are, but I haven't here. And also, just for the simplicity of the presentation, I didn't want to add all that extra stuff. It was more about process design. Yeah. Okay.
And if this was for an agile iteration, how would you handle splitting an incomplete story at the end of the iteration?
That's a good question. The majority of the work that we do here is agile-esque, but we do a fair bit of fixed price government stuff. So I'm not super familiar with the agile paradigm. But yeah, so unfortunately I can't really give a fantastic answer to that question. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. A few people just chatted in regarding the last question on time tracking. Matt Dorr chatted in, I think that requiring time tracking is much improved in 4.2. Mm-hmm. Someone also provided a link. Just look up JIRA/enabling time tracking and something will pop up. And then we have another one. You can make the time worked field mandatory on the workflow transition, which is a plugin.
Yes.
So that helps out with that one. And then
Mhm.
in terms of workflow, how do you handle when an issue goes from test environment to production?
We don't have any. So the workflows that we've got were for the life cycles of the defects. So they are really within a testing environment, which the client. There could be two independent testing environments, one internally, one out of the client's base operations. Once things have gone into production, you could have a separate workflow for that, or you integrate it into the current workflows. I tend to, as I said before, I tend to like to.
Oh, you just cut out a little bit.
Separate them out a little. What was that, sorry?
You just cut out for a second, that's all.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just saying that you could absolutely include production in these workflows if you wanted to, or in workflows similar to these. But I tend to like to break my workflows up so they're not too complex and too long and not too confusing for people when you're training them. So what I would probably do is have a separate workflow for the production environment if you wanted to go about it that way. But these workflows are based more on the issue type, so in this case, defects and change requests. And so they're more the life cycle of those issues rather than the differences between different environments.
Okay. And here's one that came in. How does workflow integrate with a release cycle?
So you can have, within JIRA, you can set it up so that certain things happen after you move on to a new release. So, for example, the on-hold stuff that I was talking about before, we say that after a release, we want the issue in the on-hold state to move back to the open state, and you can set that up. Or you can manage it manually if you prefer to do that. You could have a just very simple list of things that someone who is doing the release management needs to do, which would be change the new release, move out all of on-hold issues, etc. We don't worry about release management within the workflows themselves, because as I say, they're more worried about the issue types, the defects, change requests, which are above the release cycle. They don't really care where in the release cycle we're at. They more care about where a defect starts, where it ends, and all the places and go to in between, which is separate to release management.
Okay. Someone just wanted to know how big your team is.
My current team here at Insight4, it's pretty new. I started here with Insight4 at the beginning of the year, and I currently have a team of 3 people working with me who are currently working embedded in one of our clients' offices. We're still pretty small, but we're working at ramping up, and I've started process design and implementation here because I think once you get that stuff bedded down, training and improving rigor over the whole company from a quality assurance perspective becomes much easier. And I absolutely believe that JIRA is a fantastic tool for doing so.
Okay. And someone was also impressed with the diagrams that you showed someone else. And do you review the diagrams shown in this webinar with the clients, or do they see a simplified version? And also, can you describe any other documentation or training material that you or the client might prepare for users of the workflow?
Yeah, absolutely. So we these workflows, as you saw them today, go into our project initiation documentation. So when we're tendering for new projects, they also go into training documentation that we produce, which covers this stuff. So to give you an example, when I am starting with a new client who might not be familiar with JIRA or issue tracking applications themselves, I have a JIRA user guide which includes this stuff. And that is very basic terminology, very basic information on how on what JIRA does and why it does it, and why we use it, and also workflows that these things that they will be creating over the course of the project will go through. And yes, then I have more complex documentation. So I have a separate document for logging client defect. which includes this workflow. It includes a very explicit set of instructions on how to log a defect and best practice for the descriptions of the defect. I have probably over the top information on the use of priority and severity, because it is very common for projects to log for clients to log every defect that they find as incredibly high priority. And included in that, I have a table, which it's a matrix for priority versus severity, and it shows you examples of all of the different combinations of priority versus severity. So there's 4 levels for each, and I have examples for each of those combinations. To answer your question in short, I have one document that I use for clients who've never gotten involved in this stuff before, and it might be a bit confusing for them to jump straight into all the jargony stuff. And then once we've gone through that, and I usually do that in a one-on-one environment, or at worst over the phone. After we've done that, I go on to the how to log a defect, client defect documentation, which is a lot more in-depth and a lot more jargony, but also necessary stuff. And you just kind of need to be a bit flexible with the training of your clients, because you don't really know how good at this stuff they are and how much experience they've had with it. And I also tend to use these documents for my internal training as well. When we're putting on new testers, they need to understand these processes as well as I do, because they need to be able to enforce them as well. And I think, did that cover everything?
Yeah, definitely. And then
Okay.
I guess, someone was interested also in who designs your workflows. Is it business analysts, systems people, or collaboration?
So I did those as the quality assurance team leader. So I do analysis and testing, and all of that stuff all comes under my umbrella. And once I did my drafts, I would show them to our lead developers to get their input, and also to our project managers and directors. Anyway, basically anyone who has a stake in these workflows working, because they really do affect the whole company, and they're not just for us. They're not just to put into webinars and show off on the internet. They really do affect our day-to-day work, because everything we do has to go through a workflow at some stage. So yes, I do the initial design. I'll put them into a diagram, and then I'll show them to the team leaders and as I said. And once all that's group, the whole company, and we'll just step through them, kind of like we did today, probably with a beer in our hands. And yeah, because everyone is going to be using these workflows, and it's important that everyone cares about them. If people are just clicking through your workflows, then it's been a waste of effort, and you lose a bunch of that rigor that we really do believe is very, very important. So training.
Okay. Yeah, and so on that training, for a client who's new to JIRA, what sort of training do you provide on JIRA itself, not just workflows? And are they expected just to review the JIRA user guide?
We don't like just throwing a big, thick document at our clients and asking them to read it, and then there'll be a test at the end. It's a bit harsh, so we'll give them our user guide, which is only pages long, 2 or 3 pages long. We'll ask them to be aware of that document, and then I will basically make as much time as they need to come and sit down with them in their office if they're local, or travel to them if they're not local, or at worst, say, do it over the phone or with to actually do some one-on-one training with them, so that each person is comfortable with the tasks that they will be performing within JIRA, be it the correction of defects or whatever the case may be. Because we also use JIRA for logging things like questions and issues and all that other stuff, which there are separate workflows for. Yeah.
Okay. And someone had raised a concern. Are there any potential issues with clients having direct access to your JIRA system?
I do. As far as I know, and please, if anyone knows of a way around it, let me know. As far as I know, it isn't possible in the current state, in JIRA's current versions, to define access levels per issue type. So what I would really like to be able to do is create accounts for our clients and them only be able to see issues that they log, or any client fix that have been logged. So you can lock it right down to actual issue type. As far as I know, we can't do that at this point. I have had a look on the Atlassian JIRA instance, and I think there's a fairly long thread in there which basically boils down to working on it, give us a bit more time. So I think you guys have got it coming. We're just looking for it. Mm-hmm. So the concern I have is that, yeah, our clients potentially could log into JIRA, they have access to the project, and that means they have access to every issue within that project. And that could be a concern. So what we've done is we're using the current JIRA security stuff under administration in JIRA. You can create security schemes which have levels which you can tie down to users, groups, or project roles. And we're very careful when we're creating defects that we bear in mind that our client could possibly have visibility to this issue at some stage. And if we're worried about that, we can set the security level of each specific issue to be internal only. And that means people with internal project roles are the only ones that are able to see those issues themselves. And that also gives us the ability to create comments on any issue which can have different independent security levels assigned as well. So it does require a fairly big effort from our team to keep on top of that and make sure that anything they're putting into JIRA remains professional. Obviously, this is a professional production system, and it is possible that our clients could have visibility to them. So, yeah, we just need to be very careful with that.
Yeah. Okay, here's one. For the estimates for quotes, do you use other time tracking tools, plugins, or anything like that, or built-in JIRA Workflows?
No, not at this stage. We do, for our time estimates, it's very much a collaborative meeting-based system where we talk about what we think is going to be required for our change requests from the development team, from the test team, from analysis, etc. Put those estimates, once we've come up with them ourselves, into JIRA using the, let me just think what it was called, the original estimates field, which allows us to track using weeks, days, hours, and month, minutes. So yeah, we don't use any plugins explicitly in JIRA for that, but we do put those times once we've created JIRA. Yes.
Okay. So someone had a question here on the workflow. Is it okay for a workflow to stop at resolved? JIRA fires different events for issue resolved and issue closed, but it might not require, for example, any testing, and would go open, in progress to closed.
You can skip it if you want to. I mean, it's the workflow engine in JIRA is very extensible, and how you design your workflows is totally up to you. The examples I gave today are just the workflows that we use here at Insight4. If you want to skip the resolved step, you may. Obviously, if you're working in a company that doesn't have a test team, and we're talking about a defect being logged by a client directly to a developer, the developer does the work, they test their own work, and once they can close it, whatever the case may be. That is okay if you want to do it that way, and if your team necessitates it, yeah, absolutely. But I definitely recommend that if a client is logging defects, that they are the ones to verify and close them themselves. Like I said, if a client logs an issue into JIRA and it gets closed without their input, then it can start to feel as though that they don't really have a say in what's going on, and that the things that they're asking for, or the questions they're asking, or the defects they're logging are just disappearing into JIRA and not going anywhere. And that's not what JIRA is about. It's a collaboration tool. So it is. I highly recommend that if a client logs a defect, they be the ones to close it.
Okay. And how does your
internally, if you want to skip, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just saying, internally, if you want to skip the resolved state, then that's up to you.
Okay. How does your process ensure that someone picks it up for work rather than just getting lost?
So, as we saw in JIRA, the workflow states are how you progress an issue forward. If you want to fix it, you've got to click the fixed link in the workflow actions panel. if you want to reject it, you've got to do that within the Workflow Actions panel. I mean, if you really want to, you can manually edit an issue and change its state and all that sort of stuff. You can move things if you've got admin rights to a project. If you really want to, you can go around the workflow, but generally people are pretty good at using the workflows because they agree that the workflows are important. I'm not putting them there to get in people's way or to make anyone's job harder. They are in there to provide a level of rigor that doesn't exist without that sort of workflow. So JIRA does that enforcement for me, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah. All right, well, there are a number of more questions, but for time's sake, I'm going to go ahead and move on. And what I'm going to do is email Jason all of the questions that were unanswered, and then he can reach back to you guys directly. But yeah, people
yes,
are
please.
interested. People are really interested in this, and I think the webinar was definitely a success for that reason.
Excellent.
So with that,
Glad I could help.
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to thank you, Jason. And if people have more questions other than the ones that you've already asked, feel free to email me at webinars@Atlassian.com or Jason at Insight4.com. And like I said, I will be sure he gets the unanswered questions that you guys pass through. And as I said at the beginning of this webinar, it is being recorded, and it'll find its way to Atlassian.com/TV. And just a quick plug for some upcoming webinars. Tomorrow I'm going to do a plugin of the month with Scarlett, and that's basically clustering for JIRA, so that should be interesting. And then on the 7th of October, another plugin of the month with OpsHub, and they're going to do a lean development with JIRA. And you can track all of the webinars that I have scheduled at Atlassian.com/about/events. So yeah, Jason, thanks a lot.
No problems at all. Thank you.
All right, and yeah, again, for everyone that has questions, I'll get them to Jason, and if you have more questions, feel free to reach out directly to him. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, bye.